May you be deprived of your mother. You are a man of sharp intellect, a poet. Can you truly not distinguish the good from the bad? This furious thought struck the chieftain like a bolt of lightning, compelling him to pull the cotton from his own ears in absolute disgust. The shameful fear of bewitched words gave way to a burning curiosity, pushing the proud aristocrat straight into the home of the most hated man in Mecca. What he heard there permanently turned his past life to dust. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and watch this video to the end to discover why the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, flatly refused to curse this chieftain's cruel tribe, and how that single act of mercy forged an entire armed army. Chapter 1. Poisonous Hospitality. The scorching sun ruthlessly baked the black cliffs of Mecca. The air trembled with heat and tension. The city existed in a state of hidden warfare. The prophetic mission of Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was gathering momentum, sparking sheer panic among the ruling elite. The Meccan nobility was drowning in pagan cults. Their idols generated colossal revenue. The call to monotheism threatened to completely dismantle the economic model of this place. Priests and merchants united for a single purpose. They launched a massive campaign to discredit the messenger of God. Peace and blessings be upon him. Lookouts were stationed at all approaches to the city. Every arriving traveler underwent intense psychological conditioning. People were injected with a profound terror of the new religion. The pure name of the preacher was mercilessly slandered in every conversation. Into this boiling cauldron arrived Tufail ibn Amr al-Dawsi. He was a man of exceptional status, the chieftain of the powerful Dawes tribe. He was known throughout Arabia as a fiercely generous leader. He fed hungry travelers. He provided safe haven for terrified fugitives. He pulled the destitute from the depths of poverty. Beyond his martial valor, Tufail possessed an incredibly refined perception of the world. He was a brilliant poet. His speech flowed in verses, even in simple, everyday conversation. The chieftain's sharp mind could detect any falsehood. The Quraysh perfectly understood the magnitude of this figure. Allowing the truth to influence such a man was tantamount to death. The trap snapped shut instantly. The leaders of Mecca met their guest right at the city gates. They surrounded the poet with unprecedented attention. He was provided with the most luxurious accommodations. His rooms were lined with soft Persian carpets. Servants brought trays laden with exquisite dishes, dripping with fat and honey. The lavish attention lulled his vigilance. As soon as the chieftain had satisfied his hunger and rested from the road, the psychological manipulation began. The hosts formed a tight ring around him. Their faces displayed an extreme degree of concern and sorrow. The elders began to speak in insinuating voices, poisoned with fear. They delivered pre-rehearsed words, employing powerful manipulation. "O Tufail, you have arrived in our city, and we wish to warn you about the destructive magic of a man who claims to be a prophet. He has brought us much grief, destroyed our unity, and severed the ties between father and son, husband and wife, brother and sister. We fear that you and your people might have to endure what we have had to face." Every single word hit its mark flawlessly. The Quraysh knew the core vulnerability of a tribal leader. Kinship ties and clan unity were more important to him than his own life. They masterfully pressed this lever. By Allah, they unleashed an avalanche of horrifying stories upon their guest. An endless stream of lies poured into the poet's ears. They painted vivid pictures of fractured families and abandoned children. The illusion of danger became palpable. The propaganda worked flawlessly. The poet's sharp mind fell into the trap of someone else's fear. Tufail made a categorical decision. He swore a firm oath to avoid any encounters with this preacher. He forbade himself from hearing even the slightest sound of his voice. The seed of panic took deep root in the soul of the brave warrior. He genuinely believed in the destructive power of mysterious incantations. Chapter 2. cotton in the ears, and the call of truth. The morning turned out to be brutally hot. The scorching air burned the lungs with every breath. Tufail prepared to leave his provided luxurious chambers. Over the long night, his fear of the unknown had morphed into a physical sensation of piercing cold. The mighty leader dreaded the coming day. Enemies in heavy armor on the battlefield evoked his fury. But now the brave warrior felt a primal terror of words. He feared the echo of a stranger's speech more than any sharp blades or poisoned arrows. The venom of the Quraysh propaganda had penetrated too deeply into his consciousness. The poet took two pieces of ordinary, coarse cotton. His strong fingers were accustomed to confidently gripping the hilt of a heavy sword. Now those same hands betrayed him with a slight tremble. He nervously rolled the cotton into dense, tight balls. Then he forcefully pressed them deep into his ears. The surrounding world instantly lost its volume. The familiar sounds of the morning city vanished without a trace. All that remained was the rhythmic, muffled thud of his own blood in his temples. Tufail had deliberately rendered himself deaf. He resorted to voluntary self-mutilation just to save his sanity from a mythical, magical influence. The chieftain strode purposefully toward the city's main sanctuary. He desired to perform the ancient ritual of circling the Kaaba. He genuinely yearned to receive a blessing from the silent stone idols. Hundreds of idols stood in a tight ring inside the sanctuary. They menacingly guarded the perimeter outside. The faceless deities drilled their empty eye sockets into the crowds of pilgrims. The space was saturated with the heavy scent of burning frankincense. The air mixed with the metallic smell of sacrificial animal blood. Tufail stepped confidently across the blistering hot stones of the square. The cotton reliably blocked out all external voices. The poet felt entirely safe. The fabricated illusion of total control restored his lost confidence. The leader of the Dawes tribe stepped into the open space right before the black stone. His gaze swept over the familiar scene of pagan worship. Suddenly, his eyes locked onto a solitary figure amidst the chaotic crowd. A tall man stood facing the magnificent ancient structure. His posture radiated an otherworldly detachment from the chaos swirling around him. It was Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. He was performing his prayer. This ritual differed radically from the frantic bowing of the local priests. There were no loud cries. There were no customary offerings to stone statues. There was only a sincere, profound submission to the one Creator, a submission that terrified the pagans. The outward appearance of the praying man paralyzed the chieftain's will. Tufail froze in his tracks, as if rooted to the spot. Basic caution screamed at him to turn around and walk away, but his legs refused to obey the voice of reason. A colossal, magnetic force dragged him forward. Step by hesitant step, the poet closed the distance. He approached to a critically close range. The man watched, mesmerized by the smooth, measured movements of the solitary preacher. The profound serenity on the face of Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, shattered all the horrific images so carefully constructed by the Quraysh. The experienced eye of the warrior saw the truth. A destroyer of families is physically incapable of radiating such crystal-clear, absolute peace. The artificial barrier of cotton began to surrender its ground. Through the self-imposed deafness, the first faint echoes stubbornly broke through. Quiet fragments of phrases reached the ears of the noble leader. These were the words of a secret prayer. The melody of the voice penetrated deep under his skin. The sound was incredibly pure and magnetically captivating. The professional poet instantly recognized the flawless rhythm. Every spoken vowel and consonant was placed with absolute perfection. The speech flowed like a powerful mountain stream. Oh, how incredibly beautiful this speech was! Tufail had spent his entire conscious life honing the craft of rhyme. He knew the true value of every spoken word. He could spot any poetic falsehood in a fraction of a second. But what he was hearing now was something entirely transcendent. This magnificent creation clearly surpassed the boundaries of the human mind. The poet's internal conflict reached its absolute breaking point. The innate pride of a strong leader collided head-on with a cowardly, implanted fear. A crystal-clear thought flashed in Tufail's mind. May you be deprived of your mother, O Tufail. You are a man of sharp intellect, a poet. Can you truly not distinguish the good from the bad? If his words are good, then accept them. If not, reject them. In a single second, fierce determination obliterated the pathetic remnants of panic. His trembling fingers reached swiftly for his ears. With one sharp, violent motion, the chieftain ripped the cotton plugs out. The sounds of the noisy market square crashed down on him like a heavy waterfall. The poet completely ignored the clamor of the crowd. His focus narrowed to a single source of sound. The words of the Quran poured powerfully into his open soul. They mercilessly shattered his deeply ingrained beliefs. They cleanly washed away the pagan filth. Tufail stood motionless. He greedily absorbed every single phrase he heard. Time on the square stopped its course. He stood beside the praying man until the very end of the ritual. Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, concluded his worship. He slowly turned and walked calmly toward his home. Tufail made a firm decision. Without a moment of hesitation, the chieftain followed him. Just a few hours ago, the cautious guest had been terrified of the slightest breath of wind. Now he was walking confidently straight into the home of the man the rulers of Mecca called the greatest threat to Arabia. His primal fear for his life had completely capitulated. In its place came a burning, overwhelming desire to comprehend the truth that had just been revealed to him. Chapter 3. Truth Within the Walls. The narrow streets of Mecca breathed an unbearable heat. The sun melted the sandstone of the houses. Tufail, acting as if hypnotized, followed behind Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. He maintained his distance. The chieftain's footsteps betrayed his intense internal agitation. Reaching a modest dwelling, the host opened the door. The leader of the Dawes tribe crossed the threshold. The air inside was surprisingly cool. The meager furnishings contrasted sharply with the luxurious chambers of the nobility. There was no feigned arrogance here. There was no fake grandeur. Tufail took a decisive step forward. He looked the master of the house straight in the eye. The poet's gaze searched for the slightest signs of the terrifying sorcerer the elders had screamed about. He found absolutely nothing but profound tranquility and dignity. The chieftain took a deep breath. The pride of a leader gave way to absolute honesty. He spoke the words that permanently shattered the wall of lies. "O Muhammad, your people told me so many terrible things about you, and never ceased instilling fear in me regarding your affair, to the point that I plugged my ears with cotton just so I wouldn't hear you. But Allah willed that I should hear your speech, and I found it beautiful. Tell me about the religion with which you have come." Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, showed no surprise. He did not offer excuses. He did not begin to furiously accuse the Quraysh of lying. The messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, answered softly. He told the visiting chieftain about the religion revealed to him by the Almighty. His voice sounded steady and calm. He spoke of the one Creator. He explained the utter pointlessness of worshiping deaf stone idols. The words fell into the poet's soul like long-awaited rain upon a parched desert. Then the host began to recite. He recited the Quranic surahs Al-Ikhlas and Al-Falaq. The sounds filled the room with an incredible, undeniable power. Tufail froze. Being a master of words, he instantly grasped the sheer scale of what he was hearing. This could not have been composed by a human mind. Within these short lines lay the entire essence of the universe. They pierced his consciousness with their crystal clarity. They carried an absolute, indisputable truth. Hearing this magnificent speech, the poet fully realized his own spiritual blindness. His past life suddenly seemed like a dirty pagan nightmare. In a single second, the illusions crumbled. He understood that there was no better path than the one walked by the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. The great chieftain, before whom entire tribes trembled, made the most important decision of his life. He reached his hands forward in a gesture of the deepest respect and submission. Tufail confidently and loudly testified to his faith. He pronounced the sacred words, "Truly there is nothing and no one worthy of worship except Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger." Those words became the point of no return. The arrogant chieftain of the past died in that very second. A new man was born. Tufail remained in Mecca for some time. He greedily absorbed knowledge. He memorized several surahs of the Quran. He acquainted himself intimately with this beautiful religion. Every new day spent beside the messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, strengthened his spirit. The mountains were calling the chieftain. The mountains were calling the chieftain back to his tribe. Tufail understood the severe difficulty of his upcoming mission. He was about to challenge the centuries-old traditions of his fierce people. He approached the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, with one final request. "O messenger of Allah, my people listen to my words. Upon returning, I wish to call them to Islam. Ask the Almighty to grant me a sign so that it may serve as an aid to me." Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, raised his hands in supplication. He turned to God with a sincere request. He uttered, "O Allah, send him a sign that will facilitate the realization of his good intentions." Tufail received what he asked for. He left the borders of the hostile city. The chieftain was returning home, armed with a weapon far superior to the strength of any blade. He carried the light of truth in his heart. Ahead of him lay a grueling battle for the minds of his own tribesmen. Chapter 4. A miracle on the tip of a whip. The journey home traversed endless sand dunes and jagged basalt ridges. Tufail pushed his camel relentlessly. The chieftain's heart burned with impatience. He was bringing his people the greatest treasure imaginable. Left behind were the treacherous intrigues of the Meccan nobility. Ahead waited total uncertainty. The Dawes tribe was notorious for its harshness. For centuries they had worshipped idols carved from rough stone. They offered sacrifices to them and begged them for rain. Tearing out these ancient traditions by the roots seemed like an impossible task. But Tufail possessed absolute faith in the prayer of Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. He awaited the promised sign. The familiar mountains of his homeland appeared on the horizon at the very end of his long journey. The dark outlines of the rocks stood out against the rapidly gathering dusk. The air began to cool sharply. As he reached the mountain, not far from the dwellings of his people, something unimaginable occurred. The space around him suddenly shifted. The darkness receded. Right before his eyes, a brilliant radiance appeared. It was blindingly white. It pulsed and shimmered, exactly like a powerful glowing lamp. The source of this unearthly light was emanating directly from Tufail's own face. The chieftain brought his camel to a sudden, violent halt. A primal awe seized him. His skin was radiating a piercing light that tore through the blackness of the night. This was the absolute proof. This was the direct answer to the supplication of the messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him. Yet the initial surge of joy was instantly replaced by a sharp spike of anxiety. The leader's brilliant mind rapidly calculated the reaction of his deeply superstitious tribesmen. They would see his glowing face. They would recall ancient, terrifying myths about the curses of old gods. The pagans would twist this miracle against him. He desperately pleaded with the Almighty, "O Allah, remove the light from my face. I fear the people will think this is a punishment upon me for abandoning their religion." The plea was answered instantly. The light on his face flickered and rapidly slid downward. It raced down the chieftain's arm. Then, the radiance transferred entirely to the tip of his whip. The leather whip in Tufail's hand erupted into a blinding beacon in the pitch-black darkness. It illuminated the rocky path for meters ahead. It looked absolutely fantastic. A lone rider with a blazing whip slowly descending into the valley. The news of the leader's return swept rapidly through the tents. The people poured out to meet their chieftain. They froze in a state of absolute, shocked paralysis. The entire crowd stopped dead in their tracks. All those gathered stared unblinkingly at the brilliant light. The inexplicable glow hypnotized them. No one dared to utter a single sound. Tufail sat majestically upon his camel. He held the blazing sign of truth in his raised hand. The chieftain dismounted. He walked purposefully through the parted, terrified crowd straight toward his own tent. His family was waiting for him there. His closest relatives stared at him with a volatile mixture of profound reverence and terror. They did not recognize the Tufail of the past. His entire posture had changed. His eyes radiated an unshakable, terrifying confidence. The light from the whip illuminated the interior of the dwelling. The poet understood perfectly that the transformation had to begin within his own home. Turning to his closest relatives, he declared, "O my father, my wife, my children, truly I have followed Muhammad, and I profess the religion of the one Creator. Will you not follow me in this?" The leader's voice rang out steady and commanding. There was not a single drop of doubt in it. He was demanding that they abandon the gods of their ancestors right there, in that very moment. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the tent. His relatives exchanged anxious glances. Tufail's authority within the family was absolute. His justice and wisdom had never once been questioned. If he had taken such a drastic step, it meant he had found the ultimate truth. They replied, "Your religion is our religion." The first victory was secured. The people closest to him supported their leader. They believed him unconditionally. They pronounced the words of the testimony of faith. But this was merely the opening skirmish of a massive war. The family was only a tiny fraction of a massive tribe. Outside the tent, hundreds of hardened pagans were waiting for an explanation. They were about to discover that their supreme leader had permanently betrayed the old stone idols. Tufail now had to step out before his people and throw down the gauntlet against their blind, deeply rooted convictions. Chapter 5. The Deaf Tribe and the Soul Student. The morning after Tufail's arrival in the Dawes Valley, severe unrest rippled through the tribe. The glowing whip had left a deep, searing mark on their consciousness, but centuries of superstition proved far stronger than any optical miracle. The chieftain gathered all his tribesmen in the central square of the settlement. He stood before them no longer just as a ruler, but as a preacher. His voice boomed over the crowd. He spoke to them of the one Creator. He presented powerful, irrefutable logical arguments. He recited to them the magnificently beautiful verses of the Quran. He pleaded with them to abandon useless blocks of stone that could bring neither benefit nor harm. The reaction of the tribe was ice cold. The people listened in sullen, hostile silence. Their faces displayed a blank, deaf rejection. He turned to the rest of the people, but, tragically, no one followed him. The chieftain's words crashed violently against an invisible wall of stubborn ignorance. Neither Tufail's immense authority, nor his past legendary generosity, nor even the manifested miracle could pierce the heavy armor of their pagan blindness. They were far too terrified of the wrath of their dead idols. They feared the condemnation of the neighboring tribes. Their fear proved vastly superior to their reason. The Dawes tribe collectively turned its back on the truth. However, in this vast ocean of indifference, one single person was found. Just one young man out of the entire massive tribe absorbed every word of the chieftain with wide, awakened eyes. This was the young Abu Huraira. His heart proved susceptible to the light. He approached Tufail after the gathering and firmly declared his faith. At that moment, absolutely no one in Arabia could have predicted the colossal role this youth would play in the future. He would eventually become one of the greatest companions of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and would transmit thousands of the messenger's sayings to future generations. But at that time, he was merely the lone, isolated follower of his deeply frustrated leader. Tufail felt the sharp, burning bitterness of defeat. His grand plan for the rapid conversion of his entire tribe had failed spectacularly. The chieftain's pride was severely wounded. He was accustomed to total victory in battle. He was used to his orders being executed without the slightest hesitation. The spiritual resistance of his own people threw him completely off balance. Several long, agonizing months dragged by. The situation within the tribe remained deadlocked. Tufail relentlessly continued his preaching, only to be met with constant mockery and veiled threats. Finally, the patience of the powerful ruler snapped. He saddled his camel and rode furiously back to Mecca. Intense anger boiled in his chest. Tufail presented himself before the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. The chieftain was furious with his people. He reported the total, humiliating failure of his mission. He vividly described the sheer arrogance and impenetrable stubbornness of the Dawes tribe. Tufail demanded radical measures. Overwhelmed by raw emotion, he begged Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, to curse his own people. He intensely desired a severe, divine punishment for their willful blindness. The prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, listened intently to the enraged chieftain. He slowly, calmly raised his hands toward the sky. Tufail froze in breathless anticipation. He fully expected terrible calamities to rain down upon the heads of his stubborn tribesmen. But entirely different words slipped from the lips of the messenger of Allah. Peace and blessings be upon him. He uttered a magnificent supplication. O Allah, guide the tribe of Dawes to the right path and bring them to us. Instead of the eagerly awaited curse, a plea for divine mercy echoed through the air. The prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, had just taught the explosive chieftain the most critical lesson of all. True calling is never built upon a foundation of anger and violence. It demands colossal, unyielding patience and consistency. Tufail stood completely stunned. All his burning rage evaporated in a single instant. He realized the depth of his grave mistake. Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, ordered him to return to his people, to treat them with gentle kindness, and to continue calling them with wisdom. Ahead of Tufail lay years of grueling, agonizingly slow work. Chapter 6. The Triumphant Return and the Fall of Idols. Years passed. Tufail flawlessly executed the command of the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. He completely overhauled his tactics. His explosive temper gave way to boundless, deep patience. Loud, angry accusations were replaced by gentle, persistent guidance. The chieftain no longer demanded instantaneous submission. He demonstrated the striking beauty of the new religion through his own personal example. His legendary generosity multiplied. His justice became absolutely impeccable. Water wears away the hardest stone. The thick ice in the hearts of the Dawes tribe began to slowly, but inevitably, melt. They witnessed the absolute, unshakable steadfastness of their ruler. They noticed the remarkable, positive transformation in the young Abu Huraira. The political landscape in Arabia was shifting rapidly. The Muslims had made their migration to Medina. They grew exponentially stronger. They won several grueling historic battles. News of the victories of the monotheists reached the most remote corners of the unforgiving desert. Then, the moment of the great breakthrough finally arrived. The seeds that Tufail had stubbornly sown over so many bitter years finally yielded a massive harvest. The resistance of the tribe collapsed entirely. The supplication of the messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, worked with incredible divine precision. Entire families of the Dawes tribe began to embrace Islam en masse. They voluntarily and consciously discarded the dark delusions of their past. The 7th year after the Hijrah, the Islamic calendar, arrived. Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was on a military campaign in Khyber. A massive, awe-inspiring procession approached his camp. It was Tufail ibn Amr al-Dawsi. He had not come alone. Behind the chieftain marched 80 or 90 entire families of his tribe. They arrived fully armed, fiercely ready to support the messenger of Allah. Peace and blessings be upon him. It was a moment of absolute, overwhelming triumph for the poet. He had fulfilled his impossible mission. The outcast, whose tribe had once deftly rejected his call, now led an entire army of devoted believers behind him. The prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, met them with immense joy and allocated them a share of the spoils of war equal to the rest of the warriors. Tufail remained inseparable from Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, until the very end of the prophet's earthly life. The chieftain of the Dawes tribe proved his unyielding loyalty in countless brutal battles. But his most symbolic, poetic act was still to come. Following the triumphant liberation of Mecca, the messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, entrusted Tufail with a highly specific mission. He was ordered to go to the tribe of Amr ibn Hammama and physically destroy their supreme idol, a massive, terrifying wooden statue named Du al-Kafain. Tufail arrived at the site with a detachment of seasoned warriors. A crowd of pagans watched the unfolding scene in absolute terror. They genuinely expected their deity to incinerate the audacious intruder on the spot. Tufail walked confidently right up to the massive idol. In his hands he held a blazing, crackling torch. The man who had once panicked and stuffed his ears with cotton out of fear of invisible magic was now preparing to burn down the chief false god of the entire region. The poet thrust the fire into the dry wood. The flames instantly engulfed the colossal figure. The fire crackled, ravenously consuming the wooden body. Tufail stood boldly before the blazing statue and loudly recited his own verses, mercilessly mocking the pathetic nothingness and utter impotence of this fake deity. The idol collapsed into a small pile of glowing gray ash, and along with it, on that very day, burned the final remnants of fear and ignorance in the heart of the great warrior. The truth had definitively won.